sophomore year at university in a small town in the east. Here, winter often clings to everything for a long time, as if it doesn't want to leave, and students learn to live with the gray of the sky. But spring, when it finally deigns to arrive, is not just colors. It is sounds. The drip of melting water from roofs, the spring of young grass under someone's footsteps, the wind blowing through the rows of trees along the path to the library. And then there's another sound, clear enough to make me look up: Wessel's laughter. I met him in front of the music department building, where the glass doors reflected the pale blue sky. He stood there, hugging his guitar like one holds a gentle secret. His strumming was like an unspoken promise, soft, but it made my heart skip half a beat. Someone called out, "Wessel," and he turned his head, his smile spreading like sunlight across a windowsill. That was the moment I thought, oh, so spring can take the shape of a person. We actually talked for the first time in American Lit class on a Monday morning, when the students were still lazy with their paper coffee cups. I arrived late, and the only empty seat was next to him. As I sat down, my jacket accidentally brushed his arm, and Wessel turned, saying something very ordinary, "Morning." But that morning sounded like a familiar song whose name I couldn't quite recall. From that day on, I started hearing him everywhere. Not in a creepy stalking way, but truly. The tap of his shoes on the brick steps, the soft breath when he read poetry in class, the faint vibration of guitar strings in the courtyard between buildings. He carried an orchestra of spring with him, and in a strange way, I wanted to be near those sounds. One afternoon, I found him on the lawn behind the dorm. He was sitting on the ground, back against an oak tree, hair tousled by the wind. I'm not used to taking initiative, but sometimes the heart runs faster than reason. "Can I sit here?" I asked. "Yeah, as long as you don't make spring go silent," Wessel smiled, lightly touching the strings. "I'm trying to write a new song." "About what?" He looked at me. His gaze wasn't noisy, but not reserved either. "About the feeling when someone walks into your life and suddenly, everything has sound." I laughed, my heart missing a beat like before. "Sounds like a headphone ad." "No." He shook his head, eyes still bright. "Like the real thing." We talked more than I expected. About classes, about being away from home, about the first days in the dorm and feeling lost in a sea of people. When I said that sometimes I felt like someone standing outside a glass door, watching the world move without knowing how to step in, Wessel didn't laugh. He just nodded, as if he knew that feeling had once taken hold of him. "You're not standing outside," he said. "You just haven't found your song yet." That evening, I returned to my room with the smell of grass still clinging to my shirt and my heart full of nameless sounds. I thought about his hand on the strings, the small calluses on his fingertips, the way he tilted his head when listening to me, as if every word was a note to be held carefully. I lay down on the bed, staring at the white ceiling, and for the first time in months, I didn't hear the cold wind of winter anymore. I heard spring. Days turned into new habits. Finding a seat near him, walking together across the wide campus, stopping under the old clock in the main building to say a few more aimless words. Neither of us named the thing growing between us, but it was there, in the comfortable silences, in the accidental shoulder brushes that lingered a bit longer. One evening, we sat on the steps in front of the dorm. The air was cool, the sky sprinkled with stars like white salt on black fabric. Wessel handed me one earbud. "Wanna listen?" he asked. "It's not finished yet." I put it in. The guitar started slow, raw. Then Wessel's voice. Not too perfect, but real enough to make me forget to breathe. The lyrics were about a lost boy who discovered spring not in the calendar, but in a brief glance in a crowded hallway. I listened to the last line, and my heart ached when I realized. Maybe I was that boy. Wessel looked at me. "Levi, what do you think?" I didn't know where to hide anymore. My whole chest was full of a gentle fear. Afraid of breaking this moment, but also afraid that not saying it would lose it forever. "I think." I swallowed hard. "Your spring is sitting right here." Wessel didn't laugh loudly, just let out a very soft breath. He placed his hand on mine, warm and trembling like the just finished strumming. No words were needed. That moment wasn't fireworks. Just two people sitting next to each other on old steps, sharing an earbud, and the world, for a brief instant, was just enough. I don't know what shape the future will take. But that night, amid the quiet university campus, I knew one thing. I had started writing my own story, and that story was named Wessel. There are days when everything happens so ordinarily that you think you'll forget them. But then someone walks in, and that ordinary suddenly has a glowing edge. For me, it was the days after the night I heard Wessel's song. He didn't say anything more about the moment we held hands on the steps. The next morning, he just greeted me in class with a small smile and a cup of coffee placed next to my notebook. But something had changed between us, subtle like a note added to a familiar harmony. We started walking side by side more often. No declarations, no labels. I didn't dare ask, what are we? Afraid of breaking the fragile peace that had just sprouted. Yet every time his shoulder brushed mine in a crowded hallway, I felt my heart react like a little drum, thumping without permission. Wessel showed me places on campus I'd never noticed. A small wooden bridge over a narrow stream behind the biology building. An old cafe with black and white photos of students hung along the walls. The roof of the parking garage where you could see the entire stadium as the sky darkened. Everywhere, he found sounds to love, the flow of water, the clink of spoons against cups, the faint ring of metal in the wind. Do you ever fear silence? I asked as we sat next to each other on the parking garage roof, watching the sun slowly slide behind the distant buildings. No, he replied, tilting his head toward me. I only fear silence without someone sitting beside me. That sentence was simple, but it touched a place I didn't expect. As a kid, I often avoided silences because they exposed my thoughts too clearly. With Wessel, silence was like a thin blanket, protective, not oppressive. But then, like every spring, beauty doesn't come alone. It always brings the worry that one day it will fade. That day came sooner than I thought. We were in the library, each buried in our own stack of materials. I was reading a paragraph, but really just as an excuse to glance at his profile. The bridge of his nose, his long lashes, the slight furrow when he hit a tough sentence. Suddenly, Wessel's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his smile vanished like someone flipping off a light switch. I'll step out to take this, he whispered. I nodded, but a chill had already crept under my collar. The call lasted too long. When he returned, his usually bright eyes were clouded. You okay? I asked. Yeah, he said on instinct, then paused. Levi, can I be honest? You always can. He exhaled, running a hand through his messy hair. My mom wants me to come home for the next break. There's stuff with Dad. And he hesitated. She says I should seriously think about transferring to a school closer to home. Maybe at the end of this semester. All the sounds in the library receded. I could hear my heartbeat louder than the turning of pages. Do you want that? I asked, though the answer scared me. I don't know, Wessel said honestly. Part of me feels guilty for being far from them, but another part doesn't want to leave. Doesn't want to leave. He looked at me, then fell silent. He didn't need to finish. I understood. In the days that followed, the possibility of Wessel maybe leaving loomed like a shadow under every moment between us. We still laughed, still walked, still talked about silly things like how the vending machine always swallowed coins. But each small joy had a sharp edge. It reminded me that I might be counting down. One gray afternoon, with light rain falling like faint scribbles, Wessel knocked on my door. His eyes were tired but determined. Come with me? He asked. I want you to hear this. We went to the empty music practice room, where the walls were lined with soundproofing, making the space hold its own breath. He placed the guitar on his lap, tuned the strings, and didn't look at me as he started playing. The melody was stranger than before, dipping sharply like a road without guardrails, then soaring up, bright and daring. Then he sang. The lyrics told of a boy who first found himself in someone else's eyes, about the world suddenly gaining color, rhythm, season. But the song also had lines that hung unfinished, as if afraid to voice the fear of losing what was most precious. When the strumming stopped, the small room became so still I could hear my heart pounding chaotically. "Levi," Wessel said, his voice hoarse. "I'm not sure if I'll go or stay. I'm only sure of one thing." "What?" "That if I have to leave, I'm afraid I'll lose my spring sound. There are things you prepare a lot of words for, but when the moment comes, all words vanish." I stepped closer, placing my hand on his chest, right where his heart was beating hard. "That sound isn't in this school," I said slowly. "It's here, and it's also here." I placed his hand on my chest. "Wherever you go, it won't be lost." Wessel closed his eyes for a moment, as if holding the instant with his whole body. When he opened them, I saw not just worry, but an unfinished resolve. We made no promises. No one said grand words about forever. We just stood close in the soundproof room, where the outside world was kept behind thick walls, and let fear and hope coexist side by side. That night, back in my room, I lay listening to the rain on the windowsill. Instead of loss, something else rose in me. A clear realization that my feelings for Wessel had gone beyond hints. It was no longer surprise. It was truth. I loved him, and strangely, love didn't make the world less scary. It just made everything clearer, both what I could gain and what I could lose. But amid it all, one thing rang out, pure and persistent like melting water in the first sun. I didn't want to step back. I was no longer the one standing outside the glass door. I was knocking. The following week passed with a wobbly feeling, like walking on thin ice. I still went to class, took notes, did group work, but everything came with a silent question. What if Wessel leaves? He didn't mention transferring again, and I didn't dare bring it up. Instead, we lived as if time was a room full of light, knowing the windows would close, but still pulling the curtains wide to enjoy every ray that slipped in. One Friday afternoon, the school held an open mic at the small cafe just outside the gate. Warm yellow lights, old wooden tables and chairs, and posters of bands layered over each other created a strangely familiar feel. When the performer list was posted on the wall, I saw Wessel's name. My heart dipped a bit in surprised joy mixed with nervousness for him. "When did you sign up?" I asked as we stood in line for drinks. "Last night," he replied, shrugging lightly. I thought, it's time for some sounds to be heard. I knew he wasn't just talking about music. When it was his turn, Wessel stepped onto the small stage between two bookshelves. The spotlight made his hair glow like honey. He adjusted the mic, gripped the guitar neck like grasping a just-made decision. Before playing, he scanned the crowded room, then stopped on me. That look was silent but intense, like a question needing no answer. The song started. Not the one I'd heard by the wooden bridge or in the practice room, but a version patched with courage. Some lines were finished, the high notes no longer hesitant. When the chorus came, he didn't avoid it anymore. The lyrics clearly spoke of a guy named Levi who brought spring to someone who thought they only fit winter. I heard my name in the song and felt the room disappear, leaving only the strumming and my heart thumping steadily inside my chest. When the song ended, the space was dead silent for a second, then applause surged like a wave. But it all blurred at the edge of my vision. Wessel stepped down, set the guitar aside, and walked straight to where I stood. "Levi," he said softly, just loud enough for me amid the noise. "I don't know what I'll have to do with my family with transferring, but..." He took a deep breath. "I know I don't want to hide from this feeling anymore." The way he looked at me was like opening a window after rain. Not grand, just real. I saw myself nodding before I could think. I didn't give a speech. I just said what my heart was beating out. "I'm here." We hugged in the crowded cafe. Not an endless movie hug, just a moment long enough for me to feel his breath sync with mine. It wasn't a victory over life, just an acknowledgement to ourselves. That evening, we sat on the back steps of the cafe, where neon lights cast a faint pink streak on the concrete. The March chill seeped into my collar, but I didn't feel cold. "There's something I haven't told you," Wessel said, eyes on the distant buildings. "My dad lost his job. Mom's working 2 shifts. I'm the oldest, When they call, I feel like I have to do the right thing. Go home, transfer, make everything easier for them. I understand. And I did, not the details of life, but the invisible pressure of being pulled between duty and self. But then, he continued, I thought, the right thing can't always mean sacrificing everything that makes you alive. If I leave just because I'm afraid of guilt, am I not going silent on myself? I stayed quiet, letting his question hang. In the dark, our breaths formed thin wisps of fog. Whatever you decide, I said, it has to be yours. Not out of fear, not just for me. I don't want to be an excuse. I want to be the one by your side, not the chain holding you. Wessel smiled faintly. That's why I like you. The word like from his mouth was no longer small like in casual chats. It carried a gentle weight that made the sky above the steps sag closer, touchable. The following days were a string of moments both sweet and real. We studied together in the library, switching spots so the sun wouldn't glare on the pages. I listened to Wessel rehearse his song, and he listened to me complain about my endless philosophy essay. Some days we just lay on our backs on the grass, sharing headphones, listening to old songs my dad used to play on long car trips years ago. With him, memories weren't a box stashed in a closet. They became something you could bring into the light without feeling heavy. Even so, the sky wasn't completely clear. Emails from his mom kept coming. Calls still made his eyes waver. I learned not to be jealous of that because real love, I think, isn't clinging tight but standing close enough to catch someone when they falter. One late weekend evening, Wessel knocked on my door later than usual. His gaze was no longer vague. It was bright, clear, like fresh chalk on a board. I talked to my parents, he said. I'm not transferring. I'll go home for break to help, but I'm staying here to continue what I've started. Not just for music, because I want to live where I feel like myself. I couldn't hold back the smile rising, but the joy came with a warm current through my chest, relief, gratitude, and seriousness, because that decision wasn't easy. You sure? I asked. Sure, he replied. And if you're still here with me, all the sounds will be a lot less scary. I stepped forward, letting my forehead lightly touch his. No need for background music. The faint hum of the fridge in the corner, someone laughing in the hallway, the just starting rain outside the window, all pieced together into a mundane soundtrack, but enough for my heart to name it. Spring, it turns out, isn't just in the blooming flowers on the paths. It's in the moment you dare to choose yourself, dare to choose another, dare to keep going while still afraid. And in that tiny dorm room, I knew clearly. The sound of spring was between us, not loud, but unmistakable. There are mornings I wake up forgetting the threads of worry that had knotted my heart weeks before. Sunlight filters through the curtains, spilling onto the floor in pale golden squares, and my phone often buzzes with a short message from Wessel. Coffee? Or, it's so nice out. Skip class? With a grinning emoji that looks utterly unrepentant. I'm not the type to skip class, but just him tilting his head at me with that half-joking, half-serious plea, and I start to understand why people are willing to change habits for one person. We have a new routine, walking around the small lake behind the sports area. With the ice fully melted, the water becomes a mirror reflecting the wide-open sky. Wessel often brings a small speaker, playing demos he's working on. I don't play music critic. I just listen, sometimes chiming in with very Levi-like comments. This part sounds like the sun coming up, or this spot feels like walking into class late. He doesn't mock. Wessel says that's what he needs. Someone who listens with the heart, not terminology. Once, as we stopped by the willows, wind blowing his hair across his forehead, Wessel asked me, "Hey, do you ever think we're just dreaming?" Why ask that? I laughed. Because I've never felt everything so fragile and right at the same time. He paused, as if afraid he'd said too much. Like if I look away for a second, it'll all disappear. I understood that feeling. When happiness comes after a long winter, people often grip it so tight they're afraid of breaking it. I grabbed his wrist, not too hard, but firm enough. If this is a dream, I said, at least we're in the same one. We laughed, But behind the laughter was the seriousness of two young people trying to believe that beauty can stay. One afternoon, my academic advisor scheduled a meeting to discuss next year's plans. As I stepped out of the office, head full of questions about internships, scholarship applications, and seemingly adult choices, I saw Wessel sitting on the steps of the opposite building, his long shadow stretching across the path like a hyphen pulling me toward him. No need to text. Just knowing he was there made everything in me settle. "I'm thinking about the future," I said as I sat down beside him. "Dangerous," he teased, then leaned toward me. "What does the future say to you?" "That I have to be braver than I thought. In studies and—" I looked at him. "In this." Wessel nodded, not rushing to interrupt. He had a way of making others say the hardest things just by being still. "I don't know where we'll be in 1, 2, 5 years," I continued. "But I know right now, here, I choose you." He didn't respond right away. He just lightly touched his forehead to mine, a small gesture that blurred all the sounds on campus. When he spoke, his voice was low and steady. "I choose you too. Not because I'm not afraid, but because even afraid, I still want to." That sentence was short, but it anchored in my chest, holding me steady amid winds called later. But real life rarely lets us live only in beautiful moments. At the end of April, the school posted notices about summer internships. I got an email offering an interview at a media company in Seattle, across a long flight from school. That same evening, Wessel was recommended by a professor for an experimental recording project right in this small town. 2 opportunities opening in 2 different directions like river branches. I told Wessel at the 24-hour diner, where the smell of fries and the whir of the milkshake machine wrapped us from the world. "Seattle, huh?" he repeated, twisting the paper cup in his hand. "That's a big opportunity." "I know," I nodded. "But it also means I'll be leaving here for 3 months. Leaving you." We didn't play noble with lines like, "Distance is nothing." We just sat there, 2 bowls of soup cooling, facing the truth. Love doesn't always come with proximity. "Levi," Wessel said after a long while, 3 months isn't forever. And the sound of spring isn't just in one place. I don't want you to give up something important for me. Feelings aren't a glass cage." I looked up at him. "You sure?" "Not entirely. But I'm sure of this. I want us to support each other, not shrink to stay closer." Those words made my heart ache and expand at once. Love didn't demand I stand still. It demanded I grow. That night, back in my room, I opened the window. Spring air flooded in with the scent of damp earth and tiny insect chirps. I realized I no longer feared silence. Silence now was like a rest in music, to prepare for the next notes. I accepted the interview. When I told Wessel, he hugged me with arms so steady I felt I could go as far as needed, because I carried the sound of this place, of him. We didn't promise to call every hour, didn't promise it would be easy. We just promised to be honest, to try to come back and tell each other what we'd seen. At the end of the semester, the maples were full of young leaves rustling on the paths. We stood at the bus station, my suitcase between us like a clear statement that summer would separate us with different roads. But strangely, I didn't see tragedy. I only felt my heart full, like strings tuned just right. "Levi," Wessel said, his warm hand in mine, "go and bring back more sounds. Okay?" "I'll bring all of Seattle," I smiled. "And you? Don't lose spring here." The bus arrived. I hugged him tight, not like farewell, but like starting a new chapter. As the bus rolled away, I looked through the window. Wessel stood there, hands in his coat pockets, smile tilted, wind tousling his hair. In my ears, no engine noise. Only one sound rang clear: spring. And for the first time, I realized he didn't just bring the sound of spring to me. He taught me how to create it myself. Seattle greeted me with the salty sea scent seeping into the air and glass buildings reflecting the pale sky. This city wasn't gentle like the campus. It was vibrant, crowded with trolley sounds, ship horns, people's conversations layering like endless waves. I dragged my suitcase out of the airport, instinctively thinking, if the school sounds like a raw acoustic track, here it's like electronic music. Fast rhythm, shiny, demanding alertness. The first days of the internship flew by without time to breathe. I ran errands, took notes in long meetings, learned new software, and tried not to show I was just a temporary guest in the adult world. At first, every evening back at the summer dorm, I wanted to message Wessel right away, telling him I spilled coffee on the team leader's documents or got lost to the bus stop. We video called, sharing scraps of laughter. The screen was small, but his eyes weren't diminished. Some nights, he set the phone by the guitar and played a new chorus. I sat on the sill, with distant port lights behind me like misplaced stars strung together. But then the days accelerated. Projects piled up, schedules changed last minute. We started missing our own time zones. When I was free, he was recording. When he texted, I was in a no-signal elevator. Unanswered messages stretched into white spaces. No big fights, just unnamed silences. One late evening, after a rushed shift, I opened my phone to 3 missed calls from Wessel. His message was simple. Just wanted to hear your voice. I set the phone on the table, my heart twisting with longing and guilt. I dialed, but it went to voicemail. There are moments like this. No one's wrong, but distance grows like an afternoon shadow. The next day, during lunch break, I walked to the bay to breathe. Wind carried algae scent and seagull cries weaving into waves lapping the shore. I realized I'd stopped listening to the world around me at some point, just running to keep up. I called Wessel back. He answered, voice a bit hoarse. Sorry, I said before thinking anything else. I've been off the radar these days. The other end was silent a beat. Then Wessel sighed softly. I don't need you to always be free, he said. Just don't turn your sound into too distant an echo. I'm more afraid of losing our connection than losing time. That sentence untied a knot in just the right place. I sat on the cold stone step, talking about my fear of not being good enough, fast enough, worthy of the opportunity. Wessel listened. Not fixing, not solving, just occasional soft hums. When I stopped, he said, slowly, Levi, what makes me love music isn't perfection but honesty. Same with us. Let's share the real versions. Tired, happy, cracking voice. Don't switch to silent mode. We laughed at the same time. From then on, we stopped trying to make everything normal. Instead, we let it be as it was. Some days talking a lot, some days just sending a photo of blue sky from different cities. Surprisingly, when we stopped straining, we grew closer. In Seattle, I befriended a coworker named Nora, who always carried a camera and the habit of capturing what others overlooked. A rusted sign. A lone shoe under a bench. She asked me, anyone waiting for you back home? I paused a second, then nodded. Yes, someone who doesn't wait by standing still, I replied. He's living his part. That was the first time I realized. Our feelings weren't a rope pulling back, but 2 lines diverging then aiming toward the same growth. Near the end of summer, the company let me join a filming session at the harbor. When the crew dispersed, I lingered alone, the creak of mooring lines against hulls creating a low, resonant tone. Suddenly, I opened the recording file Wessel sent last week. A raw demo with a pen drop at the end. I listened and smiled. Spring, it turns out, can echo in the midst of a hot summer in a strange city. That night, I wrote a long email to Wessel. Not overly romantic, but like an open diary. I told about a boy selling pretzels I met daily at the street corner. About the homeless man who always greeted me with the same joke. About the first time I confidently spoke in a room full of adults. I said I missed him not with heavy sadness, but with a certainty of a place to return to, though that place was a person, not an address. The next morning, Wessel's reply, just a new lyric line, with a note, added because of you. I laughed right at the bus stop, realizing I was standing there with a goofy smile, and not embarrassed at all. On the last day in Seattle, the sky opened with light rain. I pulled up my hood, hurried back to the temp apartment, heart buzzing like before a performance. Not for the city, not for the successful project, but because tomorrow I'd go back. Not sure how things would connect, only sure of one thing. I'd heard myself clearer. The plane took off through clouds, leaving silver water patches below the wings. I closed my eyes, picturing the brick paths on campus, trees with firm canopies, and someone leaning against the wooden bridge railing, holding a guitar, head bowed as if searching for the starting note. I didn't know if Wessel would really be waiting there, but I knew when we met again we wouldn't be the same two people as at the beginning, and that didn't scare me. Sounds change with seasons. Only, we learned to listen with a heart growing wider. The plane descended. I opened my eyes, a gentle urgency running down my spine. A new chapter was touching the doorknob, and somewhere on the other side of that door, I knew I'd soon hear the most familiar sound.